Hello and welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to be talking about motivation and how to get motivated to study. I do have a video on procrastination, and a lack of motivation and procrastination, they're two things that are similar. They're kind of the same thing sometimes, but kind of not. So I'm focusing more on how to get motivated to study when you have no motivation. And it's not just for studying, it's for anything, like how to get motivated to have a productive day. I've done some research, I've read various things and also advice from personal experience, so I thought I would put all of that together and just talk. So I just have a list of things that can help you with motivation, so I'm going to be talking about that. Hopefully by watching this video someone will find some motivation to study, because I know a lack of motivation is really annoying. The first thing to do is to acknowledge your procrastination to start studying, or think about why it is that you're procrastinating, and not just keep putting it off, but actually think about it and give it some thought processing. So there may be many reasons why you don't want to start doing your work. For example, it's too difficult and you don't know where to begin. You would rather be doing something else right now. That's all understandable, that's all okay, they're all valid reasons. If you identify the reason, it's then easier to find a solution to the procrastination and lack of motivation. So let's say you would rather be watching Pretty Little Liars. Same. So that's understandable, like what you're studying might be boring and so on, and the things I'm going to talk about next kind of cover what you do once you realise why you're procrastinating. But yeah, it's important to realise why it is, because if you don't, then you're just gonna keep procrastinating. And it's like with a lot of things, you have to notice the problem and then address it. You can't just like throw in different solutions to a problem and then hope that the problem will go away. So the next piece of advice is to break down the workload into chunks. This is the chunking technique in psychology. It's in memory specifically, so we remember things more when we chunk them. Therefore, it's easier to get through things and do things. Okay, so you have a to-do list with 10 different things to do, and it just all seems overwhelming, so just do one of them. Or you've got a dissertation to write. If you set yourself a goal to write 200 words each day, it just seems so much better than writing the whole thing in one night. And even if you write like 10 words a day, it's still pretty amazing, because at least you're doing something to accomplish a goal. So even if it's small things to get to where you want to be, it still counts in the long run. When you're lacking motivation to study, chunk the material into the whole, let's say whole of social psychology, chunk it into different categories. Like, okay, so for me, for my social psychology exam, there's different topics within social psychology, such as power and aggression and pro-social behaviour. So there are 3 different topics, and then chunk them even further into little categories, so you can study some things from each category, so at least you're still doing something, even if it's a small amount. The next piece of advice is rewards. Again, social psychology. Wow. Rewarding yourself makes you want to be more productive and stop procrastinating, because you've got a goal to look forward to. So you don't want to write an essay. But let's say, okay, I'll spend half an hour writing this essay, then I can watch an episode of Pretty Little Liars. There you go. It will motivate you because you've got an end goal that is small, or it can be big, and it gives you motivation to work towards it. So it doesn't have to be a big reward, it can be a small reward, such as I will study for half an hour and I will make myself a coffee. The next one is having a study routine. If you're someone who lacks motivation in general just to study every single day, having a study routine can make you more productive, because it forces you to be productive, and it also teaches you in the long run to be productive, because it takes like 21 days, I think, to form a habit. And if you're studying every day for like 2 hours, then you're training your brain to be productive for 2 hours. In the long run, it'll become more easier for you to like be motivated for those 2 hours and so on. So study routines are very, very helpful. And even if you're not revising for exams, but you've been lacking motivation to do anything in life, then having a routine really does help you, because it gives you purpose, it gives you something to do, it gives you things to look forward to, and so on. So even if it's just establishing a useful or productive morning routine, or a relaxing evening routine where you don't spend 2 hours on your phone, but instead you're reading or sitting admiring stars. The next is use a mind map to organize information. So this is more for studying. If you are lacking motivation to study, use a mind map to just see all the information that you have to learn, and it's more visual for you as well. So using a mind map can be useful if you've tried out using to-do lists and they're not working for you. The reason why a mind map is useful is because it works like our mind. So our mind has all these different neurons that like reach out to other neurons and so on. So a mind map is kind of like a visual representation of the brain almost. So if you visualize everything that you have to do, and like for example writing an essay, mind mapping the whole thing it incorporates chunking and a to-do list, because it's like a visual to-do list, and you don't have to do the whole thing, like you don't have to write the whole essay all at once. You can just like focus on this bubble and then that bubble and so on, and before you know it, you've got yourself an essay. Okay, so the next piece of advice is when you are lacking motivation because the subject that you are studying is boring, or it doesn't interest you, you don't really want to be studying at all. Dealing with that can be difficult, and I do have a video on how to study a subject that you hate, so I think that is also some useful advice in there for this. But just quickly, I would say a way to tackle that is to find extra information and really engage yourself in what you're studying and in what you're doing. So if you're writing an essay that is very boring, or studying a subject that is very boring, try to find ways of making it interesting specifically for you. So that would be maybe ask yourself questions about the subject, but questions that are specific to things that interest you. The question is, why is this subject useful? So it's better to explain it when I talk about an example. So with genetics, a way to make it interesting for me would be to link it with psychology. So knowing that genetics is really important for someone studying psychology, because it's how our brain works. Like psychology is about the brain and our behavior, and that is ruled by the brain, and genetics is kind of to do with the brain. And for example, we know that there are genetic links to a lot of mental disorders and so on. So yeah, like things like that make the subject more interesting for me, and then maybe it makes it more bearable, even just if it's just slightly more bearable. The next piece of advice is to study in short bursts. This is if you are really lacking motivation and you just don't want to think of having a day where you're just studying for the whole day. One way to tackle that is to give yourself half an hour to study biology, and then half an hour to study physics, and then half an hour to study psychology. But between those half an hours, have a break. Like I said, again, it's incorporating a lot of the things that I've been talking about, and it's kind of all putting them into one. You can see how they link together. Okay, so we know that we need sleep for the brain to remember information, because it retains it. It's kind of the same thing with taking a break. So you're giving your brain a break to process what you've just learned, what you've just read. It helps with memory because you've given time for your brain to process it, so it's kind of easier to remember and so on, and you're not losing motivation, because there's also studies that show that we can only stay focused for a specific amount of time. I don't exactly know how long that is, but I know that that's why there's been techniques like these developed, such as a very popular one is the Pomodoro technique, which is when you study for 25 minutes and take a 5-minute break, and you repeat this like 5 times, I think, and then you have a longer break. So yeah, using techniques like that is very helpful, and it definitely helps with motivation. It helps with motivation to study, but it helps with motivation to get started, because you may think, I can't study for 5 hours, but you have an exam tomorrow. So if you do half an hour and then take a break, like I've mentioned before, in your brain it just seems like less amount of time, and it doesn't overload your brain as much. So the next piece of advice is to visualize yourself doing something. So for example, I don't want to study for my retakes, but I'm going to visualize myself passing them, and then think of the happiness that I will feel once that horrible time is over. So it can give you motivation because it makes you think positively about something. And I've read that sports psychologists use this technique, so they visualize themselves, I don't know, completing a task successfully, and then this actually trains your brain. It trains the neurons associated with the situation. So if it's studying, if I visualize myself studying for the whole day and then passing an exam, it can make you feel more motivated. It can also train you to be more disciplined with motivation and with sitting down and actually being productive and getting work done, or whatever it may be. And I've actually read something similar that is useful for people with social anxiety, which is to, okay, this is going to sound really stupid, but pretend that you are in a movie and you're playing a role. So if someone has social anxiety and they are scared of leaving the train to go to university, then if they visualize themselves, or they think, okay, I'm just going to pretend that there's a camera and I'm playing the role of someone who is going to university, then it kind of gives you more motivation to actually do that task, and it kind of takes away some of the fear. This sounds really stupid, but I've used this before and it has helped sometimes. So you can also apply this to getting motivated to revise. So like, just pretend that you're in a movie and the role you are playing is someone studying right now, someone writing an essay, or someone having a productive day, and then it also kind of makes you feel like you have no choice, but you like have to get this done. So it's kind of a bit of stupid advice, and it kind of sounds stupid, but I've used this before and it definitely has helped me, especially in those situations where I thought, okay, I can't, like I really need something to get me motivated to sit down and have a productive day. The next piece of advice is to get rid of distractions. So a lot of the time we feel a lack of motivation because we are distracted. For example, mobile phones. This is why I use the app Forest, and it's amazing, but also you can use a timer on your phone or turn your phone off if it's your phone that's distracting you. If it's the environment you're in, move to a different environment. But yeah, distractions, they take a lot of our motivation away because we would rather be doing something else. So that's why all these other techniques that I mentioned, such as rewards, can help you to beat those distractions. Okay, and the last bit of advice I'm going to talk about is, because I'm going to talk about one more thing because I haven't realised how long I've been talking for. The last bit of advice is just, it's also kind of a little reminder that we don't expect to feel motivated all the time, and of course there are days when we don't have to be motivated and you sit down to study but you have no motivation, so you realise, okay, I'm just going to take a day off. That's completely fine. If you've been studying for a whole month for your exam and then you sit down one day and realise, no, I can't, then it's okay to give yourself a break and take a day off and so on, but also know that a lack of motivation is something that you can work on and you can train yourself to be more motivated, because again, the brain is a muscle, and discipline and motivation is something that you can get better with time. So yeah, so that's all for this video. That's all that I wanted to talk about. I hope this advice will be useful to many people and will make some of you motivated and so on. So thank you for watching, and yeah, like I said, I hope it helps. So